After years of codependence with narcissists, I cut ties with childhood friend Kay, who at 44 still lived with her mom and played the victim. I just get what I want. Caught in conflict and chaos, she once groped my boyfriend in a hot tub. Is this true friendship or a tragic narcissistic cycle? I recently ended a friendship with someone whom I suspect might be a covert vulnerable narcissist, yet I still feel sympathy for her. To begin with, I was raised by narcissists and have a sister who has been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, and various forms of obsessive-compulsive disorder, and has spent time in mental institutions. Therefore, I have a history of codependence with this personality type. K, female, 44 years old, was a friend from childhood and high school, but I did not know her very well as an adult. We grew up on the same street. I relocated back to my hometown in my 40s while my father was dying of cancer. He and I had been estranged since my mother left him and took everything during a very complicated separation, which caused both of us to shut down emotionally. I had been codependent with my mother, who was immature and treated me as her confidant, so I felt I needed to take care of her. With my father nearing death, and after spending substantial time back home, I reconnected with Kay and purchased a house, perhaps to demonstrate to him that I was doing well. During high school, I was her only friend, and not much seemed to have changed. Her life appeared frozen in the 1990s. Emotionally, psychologically, and culturally, it was as if she had minimal awareness of the outside world. She's the kind of person who does not know who Margaret Atwood, David Lynch, or Steven Spielberg are, yet she comes from a wealthy family, attended an elite private high school, and worked in healthcare, revealing a complete ignorance of popular culture, politics, and policies. Having been away for nearly 25 years, I was her last local friend. She had no friends nearby since then, only a long-distance boyfriend who continuously expressed his reluctance to pursue a serious relationship, and a female graduate school classmate living across the country. Kay enjoys some intergenerational wealth. Her father was a doctor, and her mother was a housewife who had a significant inheritance. Her older brother suffered physical abuse from their father for not excelling academically. Kay excelled, thus she was clearly viewed as the golden child within her family, aligning her values with their abusive fathers. Even in her 40s after her father's death, Kay appeared to be conditioned by her childhood family dynamics. She frequently repeated phrases her late father had used, treating them as life commandments. When I say repeated, I mean she would say the same line over and over to anyone who would listen, adopting a statement like "my father always said," as if she were perpetually frozen in time. Both she and her older brother continued to reside with their mother, demonstrating significant emotional enmeshment with no boundaries. There was no genuine emotional intimacy, but rather emotional incest. They had not matured, and despite some financial resources, they lacked the confidence to become independent adults capable of making their own career choices or starting families. Additionally, they were both extraordinarily sheltered. Upon my return, I purchased my first home as a middle-aged woman, and her brother exclaimed, "Oh my God, you're self-made," as if he had never encountered an adult who had acquired their own belongings and was not still dependent on their parents. I felt a deep sense of compassion for her and wanted to help her socialize and build her self-esteem. She appeared so insecure and deeply unhappy. Previously overweight, she had transformed her body but constantly criticized her appearance. Out of empathy, I wanted to be the best friend possible, considering our shared childhood. However, there were several red flags. During a brief visit a decade prior, we had hung out with a mutual friend, S, who had just given birth to her second child. Kay suddenly turned to S and exclaimed, "Oh my God, I feel so bad that you have kids, that must be so terrible for you." It felt right out of the movie Young Adult. Kay also suggested that she and her mother disliked her brother's first wife, and threatened to cut ties with him if he married someone she didn't approve of, a sentiment I gently told her was inappropriate. When I moved back a few years ago, she seemed softer, reminiscent of the sweet child I once played with. Initially, I was proud of her career in healthcare, yet she expressed disdain for her job, lamenting that she had to listen to people's problems all day. This was a noticeable red flag. She often played the victim card. Although she resided with her mother in an affluent home, she acted as if she were being oppressed by paying her share of the bills and taxes. Although she aspired to own an expensive car, she refused to use her own funds or borrow from her trust fund or IRA, ultimately convincing her mother to loan her $10,000 for a down payment on the vehicle. Despite having few expenses, I still cannot comprehend why she didn't have $10,000 readily available. Suggesting that she should finance her own needs felt akin to challenging her right to breathe. It genuinely troubled me, though I chose not to voice my concerns. There is a difference between seeking parental help during a crisis or being destitute versus continuing to expect financial support while earning a six-figure income and having parents who cover living expenses. Pure entitlement, wouldn't you agree? She expressed jealousy when I shared that I was earning a good income, especially since I earned more than her, neglecting to mention that she worked under part-time conditions. She had secured a position with a family friend of her father's, which meant she was not obligated to work full-time as others in her field do. I quickly realized that she and her brother depended on nepotism and family connections to find work while expecting preferential treatment. She continually acted as if her job was overwhelmingly stressful and often called me in tears, claiming that her staff was disrespectful or that her workload was unbearable. She often seemed on the verge of tears as if she were rapidly approaching a nervous breakdown. Additionally, she frequently belittled herself, calling herself stupid, and I devoted considerable time to reassuring her and providing encouragement. Initially, I didn't grasp that she was working significantly less than half-time. I had assumed the pandemic had dampened her passion for healing and that insurance companies were overburdening healthcare workers. Kay displayed considerable neuroticism. She claimed she could not sleep, experienced constant anxiety, suffered from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder which hindered her efficiency, and expressed fears about having genetic markers for a rare disease. I listened attentively and made space for her concerns. I felt sympathetic toward her until I realized she operated in a state of constant crisis, chaos, and victimhood. She often used these issues to justify her unacceptable behavior. On one occasion, she called me in tears, distraught because she believed her labia were too long. Yes, you read that correctly. She decided to pursue plastic surgery in hopes it would lead to a romantic relationship since she genuinely believed her looks were the issue. I'm not kidding. I spent 30 to 45 minutes validating her insecurities about her body. She consulted a plastic surgeon, who informed her that her labia were approximately 1 centimeter longer than the average size, after which she called me crying about feeling deformed. This truly happened. It was almost comedic, like a Seinfeld episode, where I had to play the role of private body validator to a middle-aged woman, assuring her that there was nothing wrong with her physical form. She generally lacked boundaries, particularly with respect to sexuality. Initially, I believed she was codependent. She would frequently come over, touch my belongings, and organize my space, claiming she couldn't help it due to her obsessive-compulsive disorder. I had to stop her and explain that I employed a cleaning service for that purpose. I am not an adept housekeeper, but I earn a good income and can afford domestic assistance. My job permits me to work from home, and I do not own a vehicle, preferring to walk or ride my bike around town for exercise and take Ubers for weekend outings or nights out. She attempted to use this situation against me. Because I earned more than she did, she would suggest, "You can hire me as your maid," or "Because you don't have a car," she would say, "When I give you a ride, you should pay me like you pay Uber." It was peculiar because she claimed to work 12 to 16 hours a day in a very respectable profession. Why would I treat her as though she were my employee? I gently responded that I preferred to take an Uber if needed. I have been living this way for a decade across 2 major cities and have never asked individuals for rides since rideshares are easily accessible. I'm quite successful and can afford an Uber. I do not have a car payment to stress about. She let me cover drinks, food, and Uber rides on our nights out, yet never reciprocated ever, rarely reimbursed me for her share of the rides, attempted to evade her portion of an Airbnb expense, and then turned around to inform a mutual friend that I owed her for rides to a nearby city because I had joined her in the car 2 or 3 times while she visited a man she was pursuing, even though I was the one paying for the Ubers to and from his residence to the nightlife area. It was bizarre. It seemed as though she perceived my lack of a car as a personal flaw necessitating that I repay her for my perceived transgressions. Meanwhile, I was covering all the expenses for our Ubers when we went out drinking while she never once offered to pay. However, if I ever found myself in her car for any reason, even if it was for her own agenda, I was expected to pay her. It was just odd. She was consistently distrustful and suspicious of everyone until she became intoxicated, at which point she exhibited no boundaries even with her body. She groped my breasts in the hot tub multiple times when under the influence, later claiming it was due to jealousy of my figure and asserting she couldn't control herself. She would shout, "I love cock," lay across others in the hot tub, and describe her preferences in intimate situations inappropriately in front of individuals who were not interested in her sexually. On one occasion, she even ran into a sliding glass door due to her lack of spatial awareness. It was as though she were a wild octopus. When I began dating my boyfriend H in his 30s, she approached him saying, "I heard you really like to lick," after I had confided in her about our intimacy. It was an unsettling, inappropriate remark reminiscent of a frat boy's behavior. I had to explain to her how crossing that line was unacceptable through an empathy exercise. I suggested she consider how she would feel if she began dating a man, had been intimate with him, and one of his friends remarked, "I heard you like to suck." This made some impression. She didn't repeat that behavior, but she continued to attempt to pit us against each other in other ways. Kay was also rude to waitstaff and bartenders, seeking justifications to avoid tipping them. Kay literally tried to force a relationship with a friend of mine, Jay, in his late 40s, who was emerging from another relationship and had just exited a marriage with someone who was undeniably a covert narcissist. She became insistent about dating him, and he requested that she attend therapy before he would even consider pursuing her. She did, and the therapist helped her improve her treatment of waitstaff and understand the importance of covering her share of expenses. However, the therapist's method was telling. Kay mentioned she would tip more because her therapist said that if she tipped well, the staff would provide her with better service. This framing lacked any emphasis on kindness or compassion, as it was presented as a self-serving tactic. I suspect the therapist understood the nature of his client. She even attempted to convince Jay that my boyfriend H was interested in her as a way to triangulate us. She was remarkably harsh toward her own body and appearance in front of both of us, while my boyfriend and I made consistent efforts to uplift her. He, being a compassionate individual, and I both felt sorry for her and discussed how we needed to support her in boosting her self-esteem. She even expressed dissatisfaction about her body in front of him, and tried to encroach on him physically while intoxicated in my hot tub, which he skillfully avoided. As for my friend Jay, the one she was pursuing romantically, he eventually consented to a sexual encounter with her but later confided in me that his experience had resulted in bruises from how aggressively she had engaged him. They were in contact for about a year. He informed her that he did not wish to pursue a committed relationship. She was unyielding, showing up at his home midweek to clean and purchase groceries, claiming he and his son were so impoverished that she needed to assist them. In reality, he was well established in his career, but had just left a marriage and was in a freelance situation. While he lacked her wealth, he was not financially destitute. Kay further insulted him by bringing him to her elite high school job fair in search of a position, despite the fact that he is a leader in his field. This behavior was incredibly belittling. During this period, Kay uncovered much about her sexuality, projecting her lack of experience onto me and attempting to instruct me on how to be intimate with H. She had discovered a newfound enjoyment for anal sex with J, and one day came over to tell me that I needed to try it with H. She never asked whether I had previously attempted it or if I had enjoyed it. Instead, she sought to dictate my sexual experiences. Around this time, Kay also called me tearfully lamenting that she had only $1,000 to her name, which was far from accurate. Proposed that if we took a girls' weekend together, she could slumber on the couch so that another friend and I could have the bed while covering more of the cost than her, and then would sulk and complain that she simply wanted someone to care for her. Later, Kay revealed that she had spent thousands on Jay, covering vacations, car repairs, and other expenses for his child. Ultimately, he ended the relationship upon meeting someone else. He confided in me that he could have genuinely utilized her assistance but refrained because he cared about her and feared that she might harm herself when he ended their relationship. He was extremely self-aware regarding the situation. She kept doing things for him, making it difficult for him to refuse her. When he attempted to establish boundaries, she repeatedly disregarded them. He genuinely cared for her, which further amplified his fear that she would hurt herself, something I was concerned about as well. I believed him because he did not portray himself as a victim. He acknowledged that he allowed the situation to proceed for too long, letting her do things for him. She is the type of individual who is stingy if you ask her for assistance, but will spontaneously buy or do things for you that you never requested, almost as a method of boundary infringement or exerting control. Jay repeatedly communicated to her that he was not seeking anything serious and to refrain from purchasing gifts for him if it troubled her. However, she consistently ignored his requests. While I think he should have ended the relationship sooner, I suspect, like me, he felt pity for her. When I attempted to discuss the situation with her, she emphatically insisted, "I am very driven, I always get what I want." I tried explaining that people in relationships do not function that way, emphasizing that their consent is vital, yet she refused to hear me. She exhibited extreme envy. When I secured an excellent job and project, we went out to celebrate. She drank only a couple of beers before bursting into tears at the bar, demanding my pity for herself and her brother. She lamented that her brother, who inherited his own practice, is a landlord, has no student debt, and is nearly 50 yet lives at home rent-free, only earned $45,000 a year. I endeavored to express sympathy for her brother's abusive upbringing, but I had my own mortgage and expenses, and did not need to justify my salary to her. While at a bar in a public setting, she continued to cry in an unsettling manner that felt manipulative, as if she were attempting to coerce my sympathy. She incessantly begged me to take care of her, as though I owed her something, implying that she had provided me rides, which she absolutely had not. It was all so bizarre. my boyfriend H found her strange claims to be unsettling. Her anger spiraled out of control, leading my boyfriend H to fear we would be ejected from the establishment, compelling us to escort her out while holding her up as we walked. She kept collapsing outside and sobbing, and he would lift her back up. She leaned on him as we walked, grimacing at me when she remarked, "She's being so mean to me," as though attempting to manipulate him into creating a divide between us. I calmly ordered an Uber, yes, I was the one paying for it, placed her in the vehicle and sent her to Jay's residence. She never offered to reimburse me for the Uber ride, by the way, and I did not ask. I felt humiliated for her and worried that she was experiencing a genuine mental health crisis. Her outburst reminded me of my younger sister's sporadic episodes of severe mental illness. The following day, I called her and she felt embarrassed, while I wanted to avoid confronting her. Evidently, upon reaching Jay's home, she behaved aggressively towards him, professing her love for him and expressing shame for how she had acted. I felt sympathy for her and aimed to avoid shaming her. Such erratic behavior is something I have observed in women in their early 20s. It was immature, but it was almost as if she were going through a second adolescence. When Jay ultimately ended their relationship, she quickly began dating the first man who showed her attention. I had been concerned she might harm herself, yet she displayed signs of superficial emotional response. Naturally, that didn't last long, and she focused solely on the significance of finding a boyfriend. In fact, she even called me crying about potentially needing to date supporters of MAGA or Donald Trump to find someone. Regardless of one's political beliefs, no one should feel pressured to date someone who does not share their values. Anyone who sent her a message on a dating app was taken seriously. She behaved almost like a sulky teenager regarding this dynamic, even threatening to date police officers while getting wrapped up in conversations with men who could barely write a cohesive sentence. Her brother even had to step in and advise her against dating a police officer due to the heightened risk of domestic abuse. It seemed she thrived on the attention she received by threatening to engage with bad boys. This was exhausting. Offering my opinion only resulted in her accusing me of attempting to control her. On the rare occasions I tried to address how our friendship was deteriorating, she would react with rage and coldness. Even when I suspected my mother had been hospitalized and she would not disclose anything, she coldly remarked, "Wow, I think you worry more than I do." I had to clarify that it is not abnormal to be concerned about one's mother if she is not being honest about whether or not she had been admitted to a hospital. It is entirely reasonable to express concern in such a situation. Kay also revealed her disdain for older individuals who asked her healthcare-related questions at social events, despite the fact that this is her chosen profession. She often complained, saying things like, "Don't you dislike it when people inquire about your job?" I would respond that I loved my work and typically enjoyed discussing it. A few months later, one of my closest college friends returned from being overseas to find his father experiencing a significant and shocking cognitive decline. I hosted a holiday gathering, during which he sought Kay's insight about the situation, and she was rude to him in front of everyone. There was no empathy. The next day, I attempted to discuss her behavior with her, but she acted as if he had victimized her simply for expressing concern about his father, a topic weighing heavily on his mind all week. I even visited his parents to offer support during that challenging time. Yet, it appeared that she positioned herself as the true victim in this scenario. A few weeks later, while at a theme park, I invited some friends, a gay couple, to join me. Kay persistently shadowed one of the men throughout the day, convinced he was using the restroom too frequently and had an enlarged prostate. It was an incredibly awkward experience, as she kept insisting he was suffering from a medical condition. On one hand, Kay felt victimized when someone asked her a health-related question about their father. On the other, she felt empowered to project an imaginary medical issue onto a complete stranger who had not solicited her opinion. This seemed indicative of a need for control. Awkwardly, she openly shared that she enjoyed closing her eyes on roller coasters to achieve sexual pleasure in front of two men she had never encountered before, which was wholly inappropriate. My friends later texted me, questioning whether Kay might be experiencing a mental health issue. I ended our friendship shortly thereafter. Ultimately, I recognized that she was unlikely to change, and no amount of love, understanding, or patience would enable me to help her. My boyfriend H has been incredibly supportive throughout this ordeal. He repeatedly reassured me that she was not improving and gently pointed out her lack of empathy. However, he was patient as I navigated the decision regarding our friendship. We both feel her situation is tragic, and indeed it is. Is this what vulnerable narcissism genuinely looks like, or is it something else? Story 2. After 10 years, Felix messaged me, making my heart race and my thoughts spiral. "You'll always be my flower-picking moment," he said, awakening desires I thought I buried. "Now, can I be friends with my one who got away, or will I ruin everything again?" Throw away because my family and friends are not supposed to find this. 10 lovely years ago, I met someone, let's call him Felix, and he was truly remarkable. We connected through Tinder, and very soon I was only communicating with him. While Tinder is primarily known for casual encounters, we only conversed. We talked for hours every day and it felt magical. Felix had an extraordinary ability to understand my thoughts and truly connect with me. Every time we interacted, it felt as if he was planting little seeds of light into my life. The clouds no longer seemed so gray and the world appeared vibrant. So we decided to meet. I will admit I was instantly enamored with him. I also appreciated Felix's shyness and reserve. He was inexperienced, no games, just honesty, but foolishly I ruined it. Essentially, my insecurities overwhelmed me. I interpreted everything he did as disinterest simply because I could not envision someone like him being attracted to me. Years later, I came to realize that a man does not spend hours every day talking to you, smiling the entire time, and driving for hours just to share another 30 minutes of conversation if he is not interested. However, back then, I was foolish, insecure, and naive. Eventually, I convinced myself that the situation was not sustainable. I was already deeply in love, so I tried to make a subtle move, one he probably did not even recognize as an advance. Even though I knew he was just as shy and insecure as I was, and still am, I told myself there was no interest from his side and that it would be better to let it go before it broke my heart. So I did just that. I ceased communication. I tried to forget. I gave him a ridiculous excuse about work being demanding, yada yada. In reality, I was simply aching with love for him. I moved on. I met my husband. My husband later told me that on the first day he saw me, he knew he wanted to marry me. Then, he did everything right. He took me on dates, he was patient. He provided me space and comfort when I needed it. He created a home for us. He brought flowers and chocolate to every date. He was a true gentleman. He supported my career and cared for me when I was sick. He ensured I felt safe, loved, and well cared for. And I reciprocated because he deserves the world. We got married and started a family. However, there was just a tiny crack in our happily ever after, libido. My husband is reserved in that area. He may even be asexual. While we did engage in sex in the beginning, it soon began to feel like a chore for him. We had fights, therapy, dance classes, and more fights. I pleaded, begged, and negotiated. It would improve for a little while, then dry up again. Even during the times we did have sex, it was always me on top, with him mostly lying there waiting for it to be over. We have children, so yes, he did reach climax a few times, but there remains a significant gap between us sexually. It feels like we are from different planets. Eventually, he grew frustrated and told me, "You're the most wonderful being on earth, but your desire for physical intimacy is quite annoying and not normal." Now we are in the third year without a kiss or anything more. He believes that is normal, that all couples are like that after a while, and that I am the one who simply needs to adapt. In every other aspect, he is willing to compromise and make me happy, but not when it comes to sex. So what did I do? I repressed that part of myself, the part that loves being touched, desired, and adventurous. I locked it deep within and tried not to think about sex. Surprisingly, it began to work. My life became peaceful. I concentrated on work, family, friends, and making our house a home. I took up gardening, hiking, yoga, and Pilates. I became a lifeguard in my spare time. I avoided anything sexual and substituted it all with fitness. Somehow it worked. The raging bear of libido curled up and went to sleep for the winter. Winter approached, and it was a long one. Then one day I received a message from Felix. It had been so long that I didn't think twice. I called him, overjoyed just to hear from him. He had also found someone, built a house, started a career, and had children. We chatted and laughed. I shared everything that was troubling me at work, and he provided great advice. He spoke about his own stress, and I listened, offering advice in return. He appreciated my suggestions. A little seed of light was planted. We said our farewells, keeping the conversation friendly and casual. But occasionally my mind began to wander. I started thinking about kissing again and getting aroused now and then. I managed to keep it under control by becoming even more active. Fast forward 6 months. There are issues with his girlfriend. They break up. She crosses boundaries and picks fights in front of the children. We talk, I research laws and help develop a plan. Felix states that he is nearing burnout, work and emotional stress are overwhelming. While we are on the phone, he is telling me how terrible everything is, and suddenly I burst into laughter. Because even while complaining, I can hear his big, joyful smile through the phone. I explain why I laughed. He responds, "That's just the you effect." We laugh and the tone shifts gently. I constantly check in with myself. Is this inappropriate? Would my husband be upset? No, but I still feel guilty. At the 2-hour mark, the call must end. This is my last chance to say something. My mind races. Should I tell him I missed him, that I missed our conversations? I don't want to provoke the bear. Instead, he gives me a gentle nudge. He refers to me as his flower-picking moment. An inside joke from the past about love and attraction. A time when I was deeply in love, and now, 10 years wiser, I understand he was too. Just two insecure individuals who could not overcome their fears. I reply, yes, same, you will always be my flower-picking moment too. We hang up, and I realize the bear is wide awake, angry, hungry, and ready to hunt. I am in deep trouble. My mind begins spinning out a multitude of adult content fantasies about him. I cannot sleep. I am up all night pleasing myself. During the day, I think about having sex with Felix every chance I get. I dig out an old video of him, an interview about teaching children to swim. He appears wet, only half-dressed, curling that attractive lip while speaking, laughing, and briefly covering his face. The video is 10 years old. It had approximately 1,100 views. Whoever posted it likely noticed a sudden spike, as one single IP address viewed it around 100 more times in 2 days. I feel like a stalker, a sexually deprived, predatory creature. I fantasize about breaking into his home and fulfilling every desire. Or hiding at his worksite while he is working overtime and satisfying my urges. I also feel guilty. My husband is loyal, funny, and intelligent. I will not act on my impulses. He deserves better. However, I miss Felix. I miss our conversations. And I know I cannot face him because I would fall apart, aroused simply by his presence. My husband once suggested perhaps opening the relationship. I read through Reddit, and it seems like a disastrous idea filled with regrets. And honestly, if Felix were merely attractive, perhaps it would be different. But I was in love. I hope I am not again. So can I maintain a friendship with him? Probably not. Honestly, no. I am typing this while listening again to his voice from that interview. That leaves one option: go no contact. But that decision stings. I create a myriad of excuses for why it might work. We could be platonic friends, right? Right. While the adult content fantasies continue playing in my mind. I understand what I must do. I just needed to express my feelings. Story 3. My dad cheated, my mom cried, a family secret I overheard at 7 that haunts me. I just want to know what really happened is my plea as I navigate grief over his cancer loss. How do I mourn a man I never truly understood? The silence is deafening. This post is lengthy, but I appreciate anyone who takes the time to read it in its entirety. I need to express these thoughts. A summary is provided at the end. Thank you. I am unsure whether I should be posting this, but it is on my mind. It feels strange to think and talk about, especially since I have never properly discussed it with anyone directly involved, and I primarily rely on vague childhood memories. This leads to something akin to cognitive dissonance, denial, or a kind of fog. It is quite uncomfortable to manage, and as someone who is generally introspective, it is bizarre to have this impenetrable wall that prevents me from fully understanding what occurred and its impact on me. I suppose my motivation is to gain some clarity. When I, a 20-year-old female, was around 7 years old, I am not entirely certain of my age, but 7 is what I always associate it with. My parents informed me that they would be attending marriage counseling. They spoke to me and explained that a couple seeking counseling does not necessarily indicate that the relationship is unhealthy. Rather, it suggests a desire for improvement, probably anticipating that I would feel anxious about the situation. I accepted that reassurance. Counseling took place in someone's home. Is that typical? And they would converse with the counselor in one room while I engaged in activities in the next room. During one of the appointments, possibly the very first one, though I am unsure, I could hear my mother crying in the other room, sharing some emotional story. I do not know if I felt curious or concerned. I was likely upset that my mother was upset, but I made the unfortunate choice to eavesdrop a little. Honestly, what was I thinking? I do not remember everything I overheard, but I distinctly recall my mother mentioning infidelity, and I had hoped she was referring to her high school romantic interest, which I knew about. However, at some point, her words indicated that she was talking about my father. She mentioned someone performing certain intimate acts on another individual. I cannot recall all the thoughts that raced through my mind upon this revelation, but it was an overwhelmingly distressing experience. I likely felt as though my world was collapsing. I attempted to return to my math homework, but I simply could not concentrate. It was monumentally difficult. Afterward, I ended up telling both of them, or at least just my mother, that I had overheard some of the discussion. My mother was not pleased with this, understandably. She was upset about the situation, not with me. She expressed sadness and stated that she did not want this to change my perception of my father. I remember where we had this conversation and those little details, but any further consequences of my discovery remain inaccessible to me. Over a decade has passed without me ever discussing it with either of my parents. We continued functioning as a typical family unit, and in many ways it felt as if nothing had happened. Nonetheless, it was evident that issues persisted between my parents. I did not understand at the time, and I still do not. It is a peculiar kind of fugue, knowing that something is amiss while being oblivious to its true nature. Not to get overly poetic, but that is the best way I can describe it. I always felt upset when my parents argued. In those moments, it seemed that my mother was perpetually upset with my father, while he rarely displayed apparent frustration. One night, I believe after this incident, but still while I was quite young, I was heading up the stairs to my parents' bedroom fairly late at night. For some reason, I always struggled with sleeping alone. And I heard my mother crying and nearly shouting at my father, using language I had never heard from her before. I returned to my bed, overwhelmed with tears, feeling terrible. On another occasion, my parents had a date night, and when they returned, I sensed something was off during my conversation with my mother. The following day, she took me for a walk, sat me down, and informed me that she had discovered during their date that my father had been dishonest with her. I do not remember if she provided more specifics, and that he would be staying at a hotel for a few days. Throughout the years, I have often worried about my parents' relationship and their love for one another. Despite this, they remain together and we continue to present ourselves as a normal family, although nowadays I wonder if they stayed together for my sake, which is naturally quite saddening. We were a close-knit family and I am an only child. One always hopes for everything to be all right and for love to prevail. Fast forward to now, and we lost my father to cancer about 2 years ago when I was 17, almost 18. Thus, I will never have the opportunity to discuss any of this with him. Fantastic. All of the issues I am addressing complicate my grief. What was happening there? How am I to mourn him? I am uncertain when the infidelity occurred, whether it was before their marriage. My mother has mentioned that they had broken up at one point during that period or during their marriage. My mother and I rarely discuss my father, but whenever we do, it often seems as though she harbors resentment toward him. While she does not express complaints outright, there are underlying grievances evident in her remarks. I cannot recall a time when she has truly reflected fondly on him. This is disheartening. I have spoken to a couple of therapists about this, and several of my friends are aware of some of these details. The first person I ever mentioned it to was my fifth-grade boyfriend, which came out of nowhere, and it took years before I disclosed it to a therapist I had for a while, which I think occurred when I was in high school. I plan to find another therapist sometime this year. I believe this is my very first attempt at writing all of this out. Nevertheless, my mother and I have never genuinely discussed this, and there has been no mention of it since the incident itself. It feels rather strange. I think I might be reaching a point where I feel more capable of addressing it, but of course, I am apprehensive about broaching the subject, as it may involve difficult conversations that I am unsure how to navigate. I feel a compelling need to understand what happened and how it affected us, especially given my disposition as an anxious and sensitive child. Growing up, I was very close to my father. He was an incredibly present parent, always engaging in play and spending time with me, and I loved him dearly. What impact did discovering his actions have on me at such a young age? How severe is all of this? In summary, I grew up as part of a close-knit family of three and discovered at approximately 7 years old that my father had cheated on my mother at some unspecified time. This issue was not extensively discussed at the time, nor has it been mentioned since. Subtle and overt marital strife became evident to me, including an incident where I overheard my mother yelling at my father late at night, as well as another instance where he lied to her about something, leading him to stay at a hotel for a few days, presumably at my mother's request. My father passed away from cancer 2 years ago, and this matter is rarely discussed. I have a strong desire to gain clarity regarding the ambiguous details from my past, but that inevitably involves challenging conversations that I feel uncertain about. I have opened up to friends and therapists about some of this. This is my first experience writing it all down. Thank you for reading.